House will come to order. Members will please take your seats. Mr. Clerk, how about ring the bell a little bit? Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 2626? Members will please take your seats.
Senate Bill 26 by Senator Donzello, the 27th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to state government so as to permit meetings and public hearings of development authorities and community improvement districts to be held by a teleconference. This bill having referred to the Committee on Governmental Affairs. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute.
Chairman Todd Jones is recognized to present the bill.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I know that the hour is getting late, so I will try to move through this very quickly. This is the House substitute of Senate Bill 26 LC 472473S from Senator Dolezal. I will just do a quick read through of the bill. Section 1 establishes the Georgia Electric Vehicle Manufacturing Commission. The reason that this commission is being formed is to continue the work in progress made by the Electric Mobility Innovation Alliance that is basically sunsetting, and this will allow the commission to be able to provide a significant amount of what I'll call leadership within the EV industry, which is something that we have heard on and on again in terms of our want and our need to be able to provide significant leadership, not just in our state, but across the country in electric vehicles. And I will just say on this, as an aside, hopefully in autonomous vehicles and then also in air taxis. In Section 2, which was the original part of the bill, this is effectively permitting certain agencies and authorities to meet on a virtual basis versus meeting in person. Essentially, I could boil this bill down to Section 2, which would be if the quorum is in a virtual state, then the meeting may occur virtually, assuming proper public notice and the public is giving all due ability to be able to participate. If the quorum is physical, the meeting will have to be physical, and then ultimately the public will be able to participate in a public forum. Mr. Speaker, that is the extent of SB 26. I ask for my colleagues' favorable consideration.
The gentleman has no questions.
Thank you, sir. I yield the well.
He's yielded the well. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machine. Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas were 155, the nays 1. The bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Chairman Hatchett is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that this House insist and appoint a committee of conference on House Bill 19.
Chairman Hatchett moves that this House insist on its position in disagreeing to the Senate substitute to House Bill 19 and that a committee of conference be appointed. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption?
House Bill 19 by Representative Burns, 159, Jones, the 47th, illustration of the 104th, and others to be entitled an act to make and provide appropriations for the state fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The House has insisted. The chair appoints Representative Hatchett, Representative Jan Jones, and Representative Chuck F. Stration as a committee of conference on HB 19. Members, we're going to take up another bill. But I want to make an announcement, make y'all all aware of something first. If y'all all stand just for a moment, we're going to have a moment of prayer and silence. Bob Smith, Christine Murdoch's father, passed this afternoon, and so she was there with him. It was a blessing. So we all know Christine, and she does a great job in what she does for this house and for the people of Georgia. So if you will, bow with me for a moment of silence. Amen. Thank y'all. Let's keep Christine and that family in our thoughts and prayers over these next few days, as we are doing with Tish and Tish's family. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 233?
Senate Bill 233 by Senator Donzello, the 27th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Title 20 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to education so as to provide for the establishment of promised scholarship accounts to be funded by the state in the amount of $6,000 per school year for each participating student. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Education. That committee recommends that this bill do pass by Rules Committee substitute.
Chairman Todd Jones is recognized to present the bill. Chairman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I'm here to present SB 233. LC 491458S, which is a committee rules substitute. This is a pretty big day, and excited about being in front of you for the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act. This is effectively an opportunity for the state to take the next step in terms of doing something that my public school mentor for the last 22 years always told me, and that's this: put the child at the center of every decision you make in K-12. And I've been fortunate enough for 22 years to be able to do that. And today I think we have an opportunity with SB 233 to do exactly that. The voucher effectively has 5 key components. But before I get into the components, I want to mention to you a couple of things. It has been narrowly defined in terms of our ability to provide this type of opportunity and choice to the students within the state of Georgia. More specifically, this is being provided to the families who attend the bottom 25% of public schools in the state of Georgia. So this is a chance to say to those children, to those families, we are here to give you an opportunity, a choice, to be able to go to an alternative, to be able to do something at home or through hybrid that will allow you to be able to extend the educational opportunity. We've been fortunate within the Education Committee, and I'd like to thank the chairman, to be able to have former superintendents, public school teachers, members of the Board of Education, to be able to come together and formulate this bill. This bill truly hits the mark in so many places, and let me give you the 5 that I would like to focus on today. First, in terms of the participating student, a question had been asked, a participating student and their eligibility, what does that mean? A student must attend 2 consecutive counts at their assigned public school. For those of you who do not know, we take a count, generally speaking, in October and March of each year. So what we're saying is that they must be there continuously, I want to stress, continuously for 2 counts. Typically, it'll be October, March, but it could be sometimes March, October, but what we're saying there is for a full year. For the parent must reside in the state of Georgia for an entire year. Reside in the state of Georgia for an entire year, and must also commit to not enroll their child full-time in the public school system, must commit not to stack. What do I mean by not stacking? They may not take an SSO. Many of you consider that to be a goal scholarship. They can't take a special needs scholarship. These are the things that we wanted to ensure that we, again, narrowly focused on what this bill is going to do in terms of providing for choice and opportunity. In terms of funding, this is an important thing in terms of we did not touch education funding, but rather we said this is based on appropriation. This would be a line item from an appropriation made by this body, and then also our colleagues on the other side of the third floor, and then ultimately the governor of our state. And it would provide for $6,500 on an annual basis. Accountability. There have been so many comments made, and frankly, good comments and constructive comments made in terms of how do we ensure that the taxpayers' money is being appropriately used. How do we make sure that the students that are in this program are basically getting the education they need, and how can we be confident? Well, I think we've been able to hit that, and we've hit it strongly. There will be reporting on an annual basis back to the commission. That reporting will be both of a financial nature and then also of an achievement nature. The students that participate in this voucher program, and this includes homeschool students, hybrid students, and private school students, will be tested more than our public school students. I want to say that one more time. They will be required on an annual basis to take a norm reference test every year. We do not do that to our public school students, but you will see in the accountability section, there's a choice between going the norm reference test or what the public school gives in that particular grade year. Of course, the most, I'll say, famous one is the 3rd grade year. From a transparency standpoint, the commission is required to put the reports up. It's going to include both aggregate data and personally delimited data. So we're going to know from each school, the individual, when did they attend, what their attendance was, what their achievement was, how much of the account did they use. From a homeschool point of view, very similar, and that leads to the account. A question was asked, how is the account done? Please think of your HSA or something similar. This is third-party administered. That money is not fungible. It does not go to the parent, but rather it sits as an approved account that may only be used for approved expenses that are made by the commission. The commission will delineate what are approved expenses. May they be an accredited private school? May they be a textbook? May they be any type of supplement, speech therapy, OC therapy, and up to $500 of transportation. We are confident that with the help of so many stakeholders, we have put together the narrowest, but we think going to be a very effective choice program. And we hope that once this is implemented people will see that we are able to cross spectrum and make sure that this type of accountability and transparency truly lifted this program to be the best in the nation. Mr. Speaker, that is the review of SB 233. I ask for your favorable consideration, and Mr. Speaker, I would stand for questions.
Gentleman is yielding for questions. Let's see. Chair recognizes Whip Park right out to your left in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, Mr. Whip.
Is it not true that in the past 20 years, public education in the state of Georgia has been underfunded by at least $20 billion, and per pupil spending is now ranking 38th in the country?
Whip Park, I want to look at it just slightly different than that. In my mind, we have fully funded QBE the last 4 years. We are now aggressively doing, I would say, not just the right thing in literacy, but also in compensation. Our teachers now, if you factor in the cost of living, are in the top 5 of our union. And then in addition to that, our school systems, all 180 cumulatively, sit on over $6 billion in reserve, which means they have more money in reserve than the state of Georgia, the 8th largest economy in our country and the 24th largest economy in the world.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes.
So in understanding and admitting the fact that systemically we have underfunded our schools for decades, which has had a generational impact, is it not true that this bill would further harm and take money away from rural schools in particular, especially because in parts of rural and South Georgia, there are no private schools that accept vouchers? Is that not true?
I would disagree with that, and for 2 reasons, Mr. Whip. First, I was privileged to be the K-12 Appropriations Chair, and I saw consistently per capita spending that was, say, double of my home school district, sometimes 2.5 of my home school district, yet my home school district had, I'll say, far superior outcomes than the ones that were spending 2x, 2.5x.
Does the gentleman yield for a final question?
Yes.
Is it not true that some of the largest public education organizations in Georgia, from Georgia Association of Educators to the Professional Association of Georgia Educators, strongly opposes this bill because of the harm that it would cause to public education in the state?
I can't speak for those associations, but I know this based on the incremental funding, that when you look at the voucher and you look at the funding that would remain with the school system, meaning the local would stay 100% with them, the federal would stay 100% with them, the non-QBE would stay 100% with them, then we can say with confidence, and we also have this affirmed by Mr. or Dr. Dorfman, the state's economist, that a vast majority of school districts on a per capita basis will actually have an increase in funding, not a decrease in funding. And furthermore, I think for the rural school districts or any of the districts that have schools in the bottom 25%, we then would have, in my opinion, if people chose to do this, a better student-teacher ratio, which I would hope would produce better student outcomes, because ultimately we put the student at the center of everything that we do.
Would you yield for one final
Of course, Mr. Whip.
Again, in saying we want to put students first, perhaps it'd be best to listen to teachers who teach our students and try and put them first every day in the classroom. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Whip.
Gentleman yield.
Yes, sir.
Chair Lady Silcox down the center aisle has a question.
Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, Representative.
Isn't it true, Mr. Chairman, that this could also serve as an economic development tool for people to move in areas of the state where there's new economic development projects, but not always great schools to support those projects, by allowing people to use their funds in alternative ways to educate their children?
I do believe the downstream implication will be absolutely a lift of, I'll say, all boats rising with the rising tide. And from an economic development standpoint, I think the data would show from a realty standpoint and from where business want to park themselves, because getting employees in is very important. Is absolutely, you could see this that way. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Representative Fry to your left is recognized for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, Representative.
Isn't it true when touting your home district success that you leave out the fact that you probably live in a pretty wealthy part of the state with a pretty homogeneous population that doesn't have the difficulties that some of the other school districts may face?
Representative, there is no doubt that Forsyth County is blessed. However, in terms of homogeny, my district, based on the last census report, had 81 nationalities, and I welcome you to come to my district, and I think you will see that I have several schools that are majority minority, and we're very proud of that. And so I appreciate the question, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the diversity in Forsyth County and also the excellence that we have in outcomes in Forsyth County.
You further yield?
Yes.
Can you explain what your version of a definition of a failing school might be?
Yeah, if you can go to the website that the DOE publishes on an annual basis, and CPRI will be able to provide that to you. It's a weighted algorithm, sir, based on achievement schedules, outcomes, etc. Sure.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, Representative.
Are there any issues at these so-called failing schools that can be solved by taking students and money away from those schools?
Well, first and foremost, Mr. Representative, I think the premise that we are taking money away is not a proper premise and a proper foundation. I think let's think about this, and I want to make sure I read this so I don't just do it off, memory. There are 22 elementary schools in Georgia last year in which at least 3/4 of the third grade students couldn't read on grade level, and another 68 schools where 2/3 of the third graders had fallen behind. There were 10 middle schools where 0% of the 8th graders, not one child, scored proficient in math, and another 28, no more than 5% of the 8th graders. So I would say continuing to do the exact same thing and expecting different outcomes could possibly lead you to a path that doesn't make sense. But what would possibly make sense is giving the family an opportunity to have the choice to be able to say, is there an alternative that would work better? Otherwise, I think there's an opportunity. Yeah, we will continue. We don't see this as an or. We see it as an and. Help the public school system and provide choice. This isn't an either or. You've seen us going ahead together. We have funded $7,000 of teacher salary increases over the last 4 years. We have done, I think this year's budget is $13.1 billion into the public school system. We'll continue to make those investments, absolutely, but at the same time, we need to be able to lift up everyone and give everyone a choice, because I think it's unrealistic to believe that any entity can address 100% of its target market.
Thank you. One more question?
Yes, sir.
So what do you think is the cause of those low reading scores in those schools?
So I think if you're going to talk about a systemic, that's going to be a conversation that you and I should probably take to the ante room, or maybe go grab a drink. And I don't mean to say that facetiously. I mean that seriously. I think we have a series of different challenges between birth to 4 in terms of what we're doing in the birth to 4 area, what we're doing in pre-K, what we're doing in terms of being able to lift up those families that need that assistance between birth and 4 and pre-K. But there's a series of different things going on. But I know this, once they get to K-12, we got to be able to provide a system that allows the family to have an opportunity, and I hope it's the public school system. All 4 of my children went through public school. I'm an empty nester now. But I do know this, being able to provide choice to them will give them an option, and hopefully be able to lift everyone, including the public school system, because my belief is we will get a better student to teacher ratio if the vouchers are in fact accepted.
I appreciate your responses.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Representative. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to yield the well because I know there's several people who want to speak to this bill, and I know that we are short on time. Thank you very much, sir.
The gentleman has yielded the well, and he is correct. Here is our posture. Those opposed have 30 minutes, and those in favor have 30 minutes. We have a minority report that will be allocated 20 minutes. The chair's time for 20 minutes. At this time, the chair will recognize Representative Doreen Carter to begin 30 minutes. Representative Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I love coming to the well. I love coming down here to tell you guys about good stuff. I love coming to the well, talking and encouraging you to take care of yourselves. But today, I'm really not happy about coming to the well. You know, when I was elected, one of the things that I was so excited about as a parent that had kids in school at the time was we were actually going to come down to the Georgia State Capitol and we were going to figure out how to transform education in the state of Georgia, because we know how important education is. And because the majority, the masses of our students go to public schools, and I really thought that education for the people matter. But as I've been on this education committee, it is abundantly clear that public education doesn't matter in the state of Georgia. At the beginning of this session, I was hopeful because our chairman talked about how his priorities were literacy and safety. And he said, go and find some legislation, be creative, be innovative on how we can address literacy. So we went to work. There were some other people working, and ultimately, we came out with a couple pieces of legislation, and y'all, I was happy because finally, we were gonna tackle that thing that we knew was gonna make a difference in the lives of our children, because we kept hearing about how third grade test scores was the indicator on how many jail cells we were gonna have to increase. So I said, oh, look at Georgia. We're about to tackle literacy and we could stop increasing the funding to increase the jail capacity because we were gonna slow that pipeline down. And you know what? We passed a piece of legislation out of this house. It was HB 538. And it is a really good piece of legislation, y'all. But we didn't fund it. We said, let the locals find the money for those curriculums. You know what else? One of the key indicators that made the difference in those states who have increased their literacy scores were literacy coaches. And you know, that was the thing that was left out, the literacy coaches. Why? Because it was gonna cost too much. So here we go. We didn't fund that. But we figured out a way to find some money in the budget, because it's going to be appropriated. We don't need a physical note to find $6,500 per student on endless amount of students in the state of Georgia from the time they get in this program till they leave high school. We're talking millions, ultimately billions of dollars that will come out of the appropriated budget. Now, mind you, they say it's not going to come out of the education budget because they are not transferring dollars from education budget to the voucher fund, right? Well, let's think about it. Let's do some simple math. We're going to talk about the budget. Let's talk about your personal budget, right? So you got a couple things. You've got income and you've got expenses. So unless you have unlimited income, you got just so much you can do, right? And then you're going to divvy it up. Well, we know what about 54% of our budget goes to education, so you got something left. So what's left? So whatever is left, we're going to appropriate that money so that we can pay for vouchers. Now, if it ends up one of those years where we're in a recession and we have limited money, you know what's going to happen? We're still going to have to fund those vouchers. Yeah. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut the education budget, because that's what Georgia has done historically. When we get our budget and we take out, here's all our expenses, but here's the income, so hold up, we got to balance this budget. So how do we balance the budget? We cut the education budget. But you're right, over the last couple of years, we had a little surplus, and it feels good, even in our personal budgets, when we have a little surplus, right? So what we do, we spend a little extra. But some of us who are conservative in our finances, we don't spend everything. We still set a little bit of the side. So we don't start making extra expenses or going buy big things, because you know what, last year might have been a good year, but do we know 2 years down the road it's going to be a good year? So we try to save some. Not here in the state of Georgia. Let's figure out how to get the money away so we can come back and cut the education budget. So for whoever believes that You are not going to be taking money out of your public school because that money is going to come out that education budget one way or the other. But another thing I want you to think about, so we've talked about the money, but who can attend? There's one group of kids who are not going to be eligible to take advantage of this voucher that you guys may or may not pass. But you know what? On line 112, this concerns me. And and some of you who have children, and those of you who are listening to me who have children that you're trying to do the best thing for, if your student is enrolled in a school that's operated by the Department of Juvenile Justice, they're not going to be eligible. Part of the thing I think some people don't understand that those kids that are at Youth Challenge that are operated by the Department of Juvenile Justice, they're not criminals, they're youth with challenges, so parents send them there so that they can keep them out of trouble. But if those parents had another option to do some other type of school, they would send them there. But those kids won't get to go. Now, let's talk about this. The lowest 25% of schools in the state of Georgia, they are outside, for the most part, Metro Atlanta. So you know what? When we took that map and we looked at the last time that 25% was those schools were identified, and then we took another map and we looked at where those private opportunities were, they weren't in those areas where those kids that are going to need those services. So what are we going to do? So I think I just heard a question back there. So we're going to have some affluent people move into some non-affluent areas to ensure that they're in a school with a low 25%, and they're going to be the ones that's going to take advantage of that money. Now, the accountant in me kicked in too. So let's talk about this. We want to make sure that these schools are financially solvent. Tell me, how will you know if a school or a system or a service that provider is financially solvent if they've only been in business 1 year? You absolutely know that most businesses fail within the first 3 years. So why not extend it to 3 years? Because I'm going to tell you another reason. A business that's only been in operation a year, first of all, won't even have financial statements after that first year. When I run my accounting departments, I end the year, that's on the calendar year, December. It's the 20th of January before I can get December closed. Then I've got to come back and reconcile and make sure that I close for the year. So it's February, March. So, and then we got to get to the auditors. Y'all, there is absolutely no reason why we would send our children to a system that has not been proven while they're in a system that we're continuously trying to destroy. Guys, come on, join me and vote no. Let's get rid of these vouchers. Let's come together. Let's fix our public schools, because I believe in the bottom of your heart, public education really does matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. Representative Howard is recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Howard. Well, I'll have to, Representative Howard, my mistake. I do have an order. Representative Roman is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. Forgive me if I stumble a little bit. I have been fasting for like 10 hours, but thank you. So as a freshman, we are inundated with information. A lot of times we are told how to vote. We're not really 100% sure how to vote sometimes, and I completely and totally understand that. But the reality of the situation is that our district sent us here, and each and every single one of our districts has unique needs. And so I'm sharing this map with you because this map shows what counties are going to benefit the most and what counties are going to be drained of funding. Look at that map. How many of y'all have districts in blue, and how many of y'all have districts in red? The folks in red are seeing a decrease in money within those school systems. So I ask you, for those who are asking you to vote yes on this bill, do they live in the blue counties or the red counties? And so, I'm not going to take too much time here, but I do want to point out that you've heard this argument multiple times, but I wanted to show it to you. That money is going from our districts to other districts, and we need to be able to vote for the districts that sent us here. Because at the end of the day, those are the people that we have to answer to. And last but not least, I want to ask you, do you really want to vote against one of the largest employers in your district? I know I personally don't want to, and I hope you'll join me as well. Thank you. I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. Representative Aden Yinya is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, today I rise against SB 233. As a naturalized U.S. citizen recently elected to this body, I feel it's important to speak on this matter, which is about to make a historical impact on our future, because what we decide today will become a historical document on how we educated our kids. I stand here because I'm a product of public education growing up in the UK and Nigeria. And here in the US, my wife are proud parents of 3 kids that are benefiting from Gwinnett County public schools. Last week, I attended the Gwinnett County School Board meeting, and I saw the great job that Dr. Calvin Watts is doing in growing our specialty schools. We had updates from a few schools: Gwinnett Schools of Mathematics, Science, and Technology, Maxwell High School, International Transition Center. The presentations was one of promise, where a student from each one of those schools spoke of their journey and aspirations because our public education is working. I also was proud to see recognitions of teachers and educators in McConnell Middle School, Brookwood High School, and Five Forks Middle School. I myself, as an educator, taught as an adjunct instructor in community college, university, and know the value of a good public education, giving you a strong foundation. I start by saying this is not a good bill. This is not a good bill. This is not a good bill. And I say that after sitting in education committee meetings, I did not see any provisions for the following items. 1, a fiscal note. You cannot pass a bill that requires funding without forecasting your estimated annual budget. I know this because I've been a strategic planner for over 5 years. The voucher will allocate $6,500 per student. Since the author of the bill referenced Arizona and Indiana that passed similar bills, I looked up the numbers. And for those states, Arizona spent $7,000 on 30,000 students, which amounted to $200 million. Indiana spent $5,500 on 40,000 students, which amounted to $240 million. Well, let's do the math. At $6,500, let's do some mathematics. If we take the average of both states, it comes to about 35,000 students. Receiving $6,500 multiplied will give you approximately $230 million. According to the Georgia Budget and Policy Institute analysis, this voucher diverts public funds from schools serving majority black students and majority living in poverty. This is a reminder of Brown versus Board of Education, which was pivotal in desegregating public schools. It made education accessible to all, and this bill does not. This voucher bill reduces the amount of funding that our public schools could use to support good bills like HB 538, the literacy bill, which would cost $80 to $90 million, 2.5 times less than this expensive voucher bill. Arizona projected that their bill will cost them $1.5 billion over the next decade, siphoning money away from the public school system. The new governor is looking to reverse their voucher law. 2, failing schools. We talk about our public schools failing, but there's an assumption that all private schools are passing schools. We should do our due diligence and use the same terms of measurement in testing, admission, curriculum, and retention of students before trying to allocate resources to any private schools. The terminology in the bill that families in the bottom 25%, according to the College Career Readiness Performance Index, the state's economic measure will qualify. 72% of these students are black, and over half are directly certified for free lunch. Let's talk about the laws of probability, a subject that those that like math follow along. if we take 10 private schools that are passing, and roughly 50 of those are failing, and we take 5 students, multiply them by 10 in the schools that are passing, 5 good students from public schools, we get 50 students that are likely to succeed. And then if we say 2 students from the failing schools, we get 2 times 50, which is 100, which is 50 more that are likely to succeed. But if we take resources and reallocate them and make those failing schools, so-called failing schools, passing schools, and we take the same number of 5 times 50, and for the school, we amount to 250 students, which is 200 more than those in the private schools. I say we need to figure out a strategy and sit down and figure out how to increase funding for our schools, our public schools. Lastly, I want to end by saying, my naturalized country, my country of origin, Nigeria, we have a saying, Nigerians never carry last. In Georgia, we need to have a saying, Georgia must always carry first. We can only carry first by saying no to SB 233, by saying no by funding our programs in our public schools, by saying no by supporting our kids, including transgender kids, by saying no by supporting bills for our kids for school lunches, and by providing resources that private schools receive to public schools. Say no on SB 233, and I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Representative Olalaye is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today in opposition to SB 233 and ask this body 2 questions. How much time have we actually spent listening to families and children attending schools in the bottom 25%? And will this bill do the most good for children attending those schools in Georgia? Well, I have listened. I run an education nonprofit that serves under-resourced high school students and have been in living rooms and sat at kitchen tables to listen to our parents, our guardians, and most importantly, our students. The children this bill attempts to serve are likely to live in poverty. These are children who lack stable housing. These are children who come to school with empty stomachs. These are children whose parents work multiple jobs and still feel like they're barely getting by. To my friends in the chamber who serve rural parts of Georgia, think about the families you work so hard to represent and how similar these barriers to access are for your district's children. The average K through 12 private school tuition in Georgia is roughly $12,000. $12,000, almost twice as much as the voucher in this bill provides. For poor families, disposable income is rare, not to mention the short supply of quality private schools in rural areas of our state. So who really stands to benefit from this voucher program? The winners are the privileged few families who have the means to make up the tuition difference. The losers? Hundreds of thousands of families who will be presented with a choice that is virtually out of reach. The biggest loser? Georgia schools that now have the impossible task of serving a concentrated pool of our most vulnerable children, creating even more impossible conditions for improvement and success. SB 233 will severely harm these public schools by diverting public funds to private schools, making it harder to recruit and retain teachers, pay for much needed social workers and guidance counselors, support mental health services, offer free and reduced lunch, and provide quality after-school program, among other difficulties. Is this really the best solution for our children? This past December, there was a tragic shooting at Atlantic Station that took the lives and futures of 2 children, a 12 and a 15-year-old. A few weeks later, I visited with the student in my program who was shot in the leg that night. Her mother, Harriet, was by her side while we shared breakfast and discussed ways to ensure that these tragedies stop occurring. I asked my student, why are these things happening? And what can I do to help? She said, we need more. More after-school programs. More teachers who are supported and stay. More counselors who listen and help. She said she looks around and feels like it doesn't matter. Her school, her future, and sometimes even her life. Back in 2019, a similar voucher bill was proposed, and it would have required $48 million from taxpayers in year one, rising to a maximum of over $500 million in 10 years. We should not be diverting resources to support private interests that undermine Georgia's public schools, especially our schools most in need that need more, not less. Let's move beyond false hope and false choices in favor of better outcomes for our underserved children and families and vote no to SB 233. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Representative Parrish is recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I rise today to quickly speak to you about Senate Bill 233. Specifically, I want to address how school vouchers hurt Georgia's families. School vouchers are government subsidized scholarships that put private schools ahead of public schools. The idea seems good that vouchers provide families with more choices when it comes to their children's education. However, in reality, school vouchers have been shown to have negative consequences, particularly for most Georgia families. Instead of assisting most Georgia families, this is a gift to our most well-off Georgians. One of the biggest problems I have with school vouchers is that they divert public funds away from public schools. I liken it to, in committee, I talked about how, it's like if you got a house and your house has got an electrical problem, it's $10,000 to fix the electrical problem. Instead of you taking that $10,000 and fixing the house, you go and rent an expensive, high-class apartment and decide, oh, we're just going to live in this. Now you got both of them to pay for. So we're at a place where we really need to make sure that we take care of Georgia's children. When you look at the data there is a direct correlation between the number of students who are living in poverty and our schools' achievement scores. Instead of diverting money away from our public schools, we should be investing in them, just like House Bill 538 takes us. When public schools lose funding, it's the students and the teachers who suffer. We know that we are facing huge challenges in teacher recruitment. Georgia's public school teachers already regularly come out of their own pocket to pay for many things. SB 233 would provide $6,500 in Georgia taxpayer funds to subsidize a student's private school tuition cost. That will not do it. It costs like $10,000 to $12,000 to go to a private school. Poor people do not have that kind of money. I know, rich poor and below 20 poor, they're two different poors, everyone. There is zero financial accountability in this bill either for the private schools that stand to benefit from them or from the parents who will receive the $6,500 checks each year. This money could be used for a child to attend a school that is not fully accredited, whose teachers are not even required to hold a 4-year degree, and much less an education degree. I'm going to get to the end of this. Finally, I must repeat that school vouchers do not address the root causes of poor educational outcomes. Families face many challenges that we, as the Georgia State House, can address, which affect their children's education, such as poverty, lack of access to health care, and unstable housing. These issues cannot be solved by simply sending a child to a different school. Instead, we need to fully and equally invest in our public schools and support families so that they can provide their children with not only a quality education, but the basic support all children need to be successful. In conclusion, School vouchers in Georgia hurt our most vulnerable families. They divert funds, public funds, away from public schools, come with hidden costs, and are not accountable to the same standards as public schools lead. They lead to increased segregation. I'll repeat that. They lead to increased segregation and do not address the root causes of poor educational outcomes. SB 233 is wrong for our schools, wrong for our families, and wrong for our state. Instead of supporting school vouchers, we should invest in public schools and supporting families so that all children have access to a quality education. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the well.
Lady has yielded the well. Now, Representative Godwin, you're recognized to speak to the bill. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my colleagues that are gathered in the room today, I rise to oppose this bill, this voucher bill, 233, and I'll do that for many reasons. First of all, I don't think the bill will accomplish what the author's good intentions of helping those who are economically disadvantaged, according to line 33 in the bill. I've spoken over the last few days with friends and one close relative whose household income is in the mid six figures. They're in $200,000, $300,000 annual household income. And I will tell you today that they are chopping at the bits because they see this $6,500 coming and they want to take advantage of it, which is ridiculous because it's not designed, even though they are close relatives of mine, it's not designed for those children who can afford school, private school. As a matter of fact, one of these individuals, their child is in pre-K now and has been approved and accepted to a private school for kindergarten. But if this bill passes, they're going to qualify for this voucher, which again, I think is ridiculous. It's not accomplished. It's contrary to what I think the good intentions of the authors have. That's one of my objectives. That's one of my concerns. But a greater concern is that this voucher bill, SB 233, it allows private schools to accept taxpayer dollars, while according to lines 181 through 183, they can maintain creeds, practices, and admissions policies that has the potential of prohibiting and denying admissions to qualified students. And I think that is called discrimination. Thirdly, it is my understanding that private school teachers are not held to the same standards as public school teachers as it relates to certifications. If that be the case, how can we justify using state taxpayer funds to pay their salaries when at the same time we are cutting budgets for paraprofessionals and debating about whether to fund literacy coaches? This is a bad bill with no fiscal note and unspecified accountability. It's bad because rural Georgia, where there are no private schools, those young people will have no options. If we want to improve and help the students in Georgia, why not give this same financial considerations with accountability to our public schools? It is for all of these reasons and many more that time would not permit me to discuss that I would not vote for this bill, and I would ask you to do the same. Amen. Amen.
The gentleman's time has expired, and he has yielded the well. Now we'll move on. The time has expired. Now we'll move on to the those speaking in favor. Chair recognizes Representative Hilton to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and distinguished colleagues. Today I rise in full support of Senate Bill 233. Senate Bill 233 provides a critical lifeline of hope across our state to families who are trapped in failing schools. Public education, as we've heard, is not an either-or proposition. We can both give families school choice while also focusing our continued efforts to support public education. This is not an either, this is not an or, this is an and. Why are we here today? This is the farthest an ESA bill has gotten, the farthest. And I would submit to you it's because for the better part of 4 years, politicians have been telling families, sit down, we've got this, we know best in your child's education. And for the better part of 4 years, those politicians have been voted out of office by those parents who say, no, we know what's best in our child's education. This moment is a historic opportunity for our state to take a step toward modernizing our education system, allowing parents the power to choose and customize an education that fits best their own child's needs. Instead of a top-down, one-size-fits-all system, we can move together in a grassroots approach that is inclusive and respects the dignity and unique gifts of every single child. Some students need specialized attention, a different teaching method, a specific curriculum. By giving families more options, we are not only improving educational opportunities, but we're giving every child an equal opportunity to succeed. As you know, Georgia is home to some of the best schools in the nation. I would be remiss if I did not recognize our incredible teachers and administrators who are on the front lines fighting for our children every day. Personally, I am the product of both public and private education, and I'm eternally grateful for the teachers in my life, and I'm grateful my parents had the choice. But unfortunately, not every child in Georgia has that choice. As the chair of the Education Policy Subcommittee, I can tell you that public education has never been more funded in the history of our state. QBE is fully funded. We are now consistently giving teachers much needed pay raises. And public schools have significant reserves on hand, totaling almost $6 billion on their balance sheet. In our committee, we heard heartbreaking testimony from students and parents who are desperately seeking a lifeline. We heard from a young student who literally has rats, y'all, falling from the ceiling. That's problematic. But here's what's really problematic. That school system has $100 million in reserve, and rats are running through the school. We heard from a mother who wanted to send her son to a local micro school with a cost of $8,500 a year. She was so desperate to get her son a better education, she went out into her community and literally knocked on doors asking for money for her child. Businesses and individuals stepped up and she raised money for her son to have a better life. On an almost routine basis, we see on social media videos of kids fighting teachers in dangerous conditions in schools. This does not need to happen. SB 233 allows students to escape these conditions while also giving us the flexibility to address needs in education. If you're like me, you've received dozens of emails on Senate Bill 233. Let's walk through real quick 3 myths and 3 realities. Myth number 1, Senate Bill 233 defunds public education. Here is the fact. Public education is funded by 3 buckets: local, state, and federal dollars. Under SB 233, state dollars will follow your student, while local school systems get to keep their local share without the associated expense. All school systems will benefit financially from this when their children take advantage of this program. Myth number 2, Senate Bill 233 lacks accountability. I want to applaud Chairman Irwin, Chairman Jones, Chairman Dubnik, Leader Wade. This House made significant improvements to this bill, already a great bill that came over from the Senate, to add even more accountability. Annual audits, annual testing, annual graduation rates, student data based on grade level, gender, and race. The Student Finance Commission will have the authority to conduct random audits on an annual basis and monitor the fiscal integrity of this program. Any evidence of fraud can be turned over to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. This is tight. We have it on lockdown. Finally, myth number 3. Senate Bill 233 does not benefit our rural community. Fact. The reality is that there are private schools in almost every county of our state. The beauty of an ESA program is an ESA is more flexible, allowing students to benefit from online learning programs, home study programs, and even dual enrollment. In this bill, there are literally opportunities for every child in every corner of our state. Now, I know no matter what I say, there are going to be skeptics out there. School choice is about giving every child a chance to succeed regardless of their background or socio-economic status. But let's not look just to Georgia, let's look to Florida. They've had an ESA program in place for years, and guess what happened? That program is so successful, this past week, their Senate and House overwhelmingly, on a bipartisan basis, expanded their existing program. I know we're afraid here to do it, but if we do it here in Georgia, I can almost guarantee you we're going to be right back here in a few years because this program is going to be that successful as we've seen in Florida. In closing, I believe that every child deserves the best education possible. And I trust that parents know what's best for their child. And that's why we need to empower parents and put them in the driver's seat of their child's education. So I ask you, let's work together for a brighter future for our children. I urge you to vote yes on Senate Bill 233. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Representative Wade is recognized to speak to the bill. Are you ready? Representative Wade is recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all being here, and this is a special day for me because I have an opportunity to speak to you as a person who has advocated on behalf of public education for over 16 years as a school board member in Dawson County Schools. And by the way, that is in rural Georgia. Even the kids like to say we keep it rural there, if you know what I mean. It's okay, I know, it's a dad joke, but I got kids that are 6 and 9, so that's how I roll right now. It's late, I'm tired. I'm ready to get home. It's my 20th anniversary today. So let me tell you, to a public education teacher and administrator, she's in her 22nd year. I am a son of 2 teachers. I was in a public school, kindergarten through 12th grade, 13 years of my life. Folks, we are a state that has fully funded QBE for the last 5 years. QBE is currently fully funded. The public school ecosystem has never had as much money in total as well as per student ever in our state's history. I am for public education. There are superintendents, there are teachers, There are folks that are texting you, they're emailing you with concerns, and I respect those concerns. But I also want you to remember that our job as a state legislature, and what my belief and what I believe many of you on both the right and the left, or the Republican side or the Democratic side, believe, is that education is the most important thing, and every single child deserves the best option. Now, at the same time that we have fully funded education in this state, we have seen major improvements in many areas. But if we're all being completely honest with one another, we also could acknowledge that all across this state there are some children that are not receiving the best. And folks, I believe that every child in this state deserves the best educational opportunity. And that ecosystem needs to acknowledge what we did with special needs. I was told by folks that have been here back when the SB 10 and SB 47 bill was passed that it would decimate the public education sector in this state. And I understand. We all have concerns about something new. But that program has served a vital purpose for over 5,500 special needs students, some of the most fragile among us. And it has not crippled the school systems in this state. In fact, I would argue that it has helped the schools serve the students that are still in their districts who have those special needs. They are getting better service because the students that weren't being met are no longer causing the issue for those students that remain. I also want to speak to you from this regard, and I'll be short, but I want you to really hear me. Choice is important in the 21st century. We have to ensure that children have the best options. We have narrowly tailored this bill, and I would argue that this is the most well thought out, balanced approach at this issue to ensure that we are doing things in this state that will give us the opportunity to compare how a student performs that receives this scholarship versus a student that is in our classrooms. It is helping those students in which, when I was on the GSBA board and I was a president who traveled this state to many of the parts of this state who have schools that are in the lowest 25% of performance, when those mothers and grandmothers were coming to me saying, I need another option. I love my community. I love my teachers. I love my principal. They're just not getting the job done. That's real talk. I get it. These folks need an option. To those school systems who have one or two schools in their district that are on this list, we already have an opportunity for you at home to provide intra-district transfers for those families that want to go to another school within your own district. But I have heard from parents and community members that they have been told that that's not an option for them. The adults cannot figure it out. They can't make that work. That concerns me as a person that believes that every child needs to receive an opportunity to best meet their expectations for their young ones. Folks, I'll wrap up with this. I hope if you are a person who's in this building that is struggling with this choice, that you'll think about children and not adults. I hope that you will realize that this is going to be the next step in ensuring that Georgia provides every child the best opportunity to grow and to thrive. I'm honored to be a floor leader for Governor Kemp. I've enjoyed being able to be a part of that effort. Governor Kemp has fully funded education with the legislature's help. Governor Kemp appreciates the work of this legislation, and Governor Kemp supports this bill. I hope that you will give that your highest regard, because he is a governor who has done much for the public school children in this state and children in every corner. With that, I hope you will cast your vote yes, and I yield the well. Thank you.
Representative Maynor is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. I don't know if this bill is going to pass or not, but I do think it's important for us to talk about it. All of us are here, so let's talk about the elephant in the room, the schools. And some are failing, some are not. Ephesians 1:16 says, I do not cease to give thanks for you. That was the Lent prayer I did yesterday at my church. We're in Lent. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness seeking discernment. We are here at the Capitol for 40 days. For 40 days, we need to discern the voices of 60,000 people. We sit, rock, and swivel in our leather antique chairs under an actual gold dome, and we debate on what is good for the people of Georgia. Think about what the kids in failing school environments are thankful for. What is a 6-year-old child selling water at a busy intersection with his 14-year-old brother thankful for? What about the little girl who has 2 parents in prison? What is she thankful for? 60,000 people are counting on us to not be bipartisan. They assume, based on our party line, we will think like them, but we will always defer to their needs over our party's needs. Now, Jesus ultimately did die after those 40 days, but he rose again. Maybe SB 233 may give a child an opportunity to rise. I got a call from a constituent that's a veteran. They said, Rep. Maynard, remember, we don't leave anyone behind. Please vote yes for SB 233. Every child deserves a chance. When I came here, I found out quite quickly that education was as partisan as Donald Trump. Lobbyists that are against this bill, they roll their eyes at me when they see me. This bill makes people mad and angry, and they show it to you. Now, like children in marginalized communities, just like the one that I grew up in, parents only know what they know. And if you're in an environment in a failing school, it's quite possible that the parents, you're right, that is some of the argument with some people. You're very right. Parents may not know how to access this resource. Children across Georgia, the whole conversation today has been about money. Money, 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 money. A child is a dollar sign. I don't think a child is a dollar sign. Children are $13,000 roughly. $6,000 per child from the state and roughly $7,000 from other sources. Now, when you go home, you have plenty of options. Children in unfortunate situations have no options. In Atlanta, I have the highest energy burden district in the city, and that means there are families that don't even have utilities on. How do they do homework without even utilities? So imagine you don't have utilities, you go to the same school in your environment. How would your eyes open up if you went to another environment? When I was little, I used to go to the downtown library. It was so big, it was massive. Because when I got off of the school bus, I ran home from crackheads. So when I went to the library, I thought I was somewhere amazing. And to this day, I value education because of my experience of going somewhere I had never been before, a library, a public library. Children walk into schools every day, and on the board it says, welcome to your school, and the schools have their averages up there. So imagine a child walking into school every day and it says, welcome we are a D school, we are an F school. Is that going to make them want to do more? SB 233 is for students. Students in schools that are listed in the bottom 25% performance level of all Georgia schools. That is a lot of schools in my district. In fact, I have the most charter schools in my district than any other district in the state because parents are looking for options. Supporting SB 233 doesn't mean you don't support teachers. In fact, I think teachers put their lives in danger every single day, as well as the school bus drivers that we learned. SB 233 is not against public schools. It's about giving a child an opportunity. Everybody is not going to run and use this resource, but if one child uses it, imagine if it was me. If one child uses it, it has made a difference for one child. My mom used someone else's address so I could go to another school on another side of town. Now imagine, I don't know where I would be if I went to the school in my neighborhood. I really don't. The Georgia Chamber released a report saying that Georgia has a labor workforce issue. Imagine if we were using our creativity in the schools that we have right now, but we aren't, because guess what? Right now, the schools are using curriculums that are not preparing children for today's activities. In 1906, we started this system for factory workers. The Bell system came alive. We are past the Bell system. We're past children sitting in a desk 1 + 1 = 2. We are now at, in other countries, their pre-K students are learning robotics. The issue is not necessarily we're trying to take money away from public schools. What we're trying to do, hopefully what this will do, is just make schools do something different. We're using the QBE formula has been the QBE formula for a long time. Everybody knows that that formula is outdated, right? But what do we do about it? Right now, our budget for education is $12 billion. That's the same operating budget as McDonald's. Now, if you went to McDonald's every day and got a burnt hamburger and burnt fries, are you going to keep going back to that McDonald's? I know that Leader Beverly said, no, he's not going. And that's what the children are saying. I don't want to go where the burnt hamburger is. I don't want to go where the burnt fries are. I want a fresh hamburger. I want a fresh education. I want something different. Just give me something different. I am actually screaming because I am the child that will benefit from this. There are some things that are not all the way right for this, and we can fix that later. But if one child can benefit from this, then you should vote for SB 233. And for all the lobbyists, you do not have to roll your eyes at me when you see me. Because it's another subject that might come up that we might agree on. But just because we don't agree on this, and this is for my colleagues too, you do not have to treat me so badly because I am trying to help the children in my community. And Speaker, I yield the will.
Lady has yielded the well. Representative Martinez is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know we're hearing all the representatives today. Let me tell you another group that this bill helps. My people, the Hispanic community, the Latinos in Georgia, the tens of thousands of students. Let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to be very brief because I know we got more speakers and it's getting late. I love coming here to the well also and telling the people, especially the Hispanic community, some good news. As a Latino that came to this country when I was a boy, I went to a failing school. I went to a public school. I also went through ESOL classes. You guys know what ESO is? All right, I'm sure you do. I've been there. I'm a product of this bill. I'm a product of this bill coming to this country when I was a young boy. For my Hispanic community, especially the Latino kids struggling in schools, it gives my people, my community, a choice. Isn't that what we always talk about, choice? Mr. Speaker, I am pro-school choice. My only regret is not having this option when I was a student. That's my only regret. I wish my parents had this option in the early 80s when I came to this beautiful country. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well. Thank you.
The gentleman has yielded the well. That concludes all of those that are opposed and in favor with the time that was allotted to them. Now we'll move on to the minority report. But first, is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Now we'll move on to the minority report and the chair's time. 20 minutes for each. I'll recognize Representative David Wilkerson to speak to the bill, and he can allocate the time as he sees fit. There's a couple other speakers. I think you're aware of that. Yes, thank you. Representative Wilkerson is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak to the minority report to SB 233. I know that the kids are the most important thing. This is my first year serving on Education Committee, and I've been very excited that we talked about safety and literacy. And this really is a discussion on what is the best way to make sure that kids are getting the education they need. We talk a lot about fully funding QBE, so I'm going to walk through the parts of the bill real quick. It is correct that this bill does not become effective until QBE is fully funded. However, once we start the process, it never stops. So whether QBE stops being funded, we're going to continue to fund this. The second thing is we are funding a formula from 1985. I'm going to date myself, but if you go back to 1985, the top movie was Back to the Future, Beverly Hills Cop, Rambo, Rocky, and Cocoon. If you could tell me what Cocoon was about, then I'll give you extra credit. But the bottom line is we're funding a formula that educated kids in 1985, and a lot of very smart people have said that that formula does not work. So we've made a lot of changes to this bill as we went through the Education Committee, but if you go to line 3, there's been a lot of debate about what is QBE funding. Is this enough? Is this too much? Or whatever. The $6,500 that we're allocating to QBE is $6,500 no matter what we do to QBE as far as austerity cuts. So my plea is that if we're going to do this, which I hope we don't, that we say you can get funding up to $6,500 not to exceed what QBE is. That would be one requested change. The second thing is, as far as qualifying for the bill, if you go to line 73, this is all driven by parents, and this is not going to be a large number of students. However, if your parents live in another state, and say you're a married student, you're military, you're married, if your parents are in the military, you still qualify for this. If your spouse is military, you do not qualify for this scholarship. So we're going to be leaving out anybody who moves here that is married to a service member, a 20-year-old that's married to an 18-year-old, etc. They will be excluded from this. I have a question about foster children. Will they be included? Because foster parents are not. I mean, in the system, they may or may not be included. So I just have a question about that, and I'll leave it up to the authors. The big thing, though, for me, is if you look at the board on the left, and forgive my writing, but if you look at the board on the left, that's a fiscal note. It's done by the professionals down here at the Capitol. They talk about what this bill will do, whether it's going to cost us or whether it won't cost us. On the right is the only type of fiscal note that I've seen. And so if you look in the bottom left-hand corner, that's my fiscal calculation for the meeting today. You'll see where I started with the $6,500 and I backed out mathematically what QBE funding is for a 9th through 12th grader, and I get about $3,600. I took one of the school systems and I said, okay, say only 10% of that school system uses the voucher. That's 50 students. If 50 students use that voucher, you potentially have the state spending $180,000 more than they did. And so that's 500 times 10%. And if you look at the top right, that's some other notes that I had. But the bottom line is, whether you like this bill or not, we need to know the cost, because what we're doing is obligating money to students, making promises to families that we will have to continue going forward forever. And if we don't know what it costs now, how can we make that promises to families that their kids will have that funding to go to private school? So with that, I will yield the remainder of my time to other speakers, but I ask us to please get a fiscal note to make sure we know what the promises we're making, so make sure we can keep them. Thank you.
Gentleman has yielded the well. Representative Lisa Campbell is recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, we've all been hearing many voices today about this bill, but I rise to speak against Senate Bill 233 because I believe investing in our public education is the single most important thing we can do to improve the lives of all Georgians. I urge everyone to consider voting for 3 main reasons. Number 1, this bill takes public funds and hands them over to private entities without accountability that protects parents and kids. There's no getting around that. We've talked a lot about the Hope Scholarship, a smart investment in our students. And this bill uses the same term, scholarship. But do not be fooled. This is not a scholarship program using new funds as with the lottery. In this bill, taxpayer dollars are deducted from our local public schools' QBE allocations. That's where they're coming from, and they are handed out to private entities. This bill proposes a $6,500 taxpayer-funded private school tuition subsidy. The average full-time equivalent per middle school student allocation in Georgia is about $2,900. In this bill, we're giving twice that much money to private schools and to homeschoolers. Twice as much than our public schools get for that same child. And even more alarming is the fact that opting out of public education means participating parents will also forgo protections for students with disabilities, background checks for teachers, school accreditation, and they have very little assurance that the private school they've selected will even accept their child or will be a viable program. This bill lacks oversight, as the new commission is not required to report the demographics of students at the individual participating schools, the assessment results, attendance, course completion, or even high school graduation rates. An itemized list of expenditures approved by, is not required either from the Parent Review Committee. Number 2, this bill dilutes funding for our local public schools who are already trying to make up for 30 years of underfunded budgets. Proponents of this bill have said local school districts won't lose money because the money is following the child. That is simply not true. Each district would receive $6,500 less per student in their allocated QBE funds. There's no cap to the number of students who can participate, no cap for family, and no cap on the length of the voucher program. It could be used for 12 years for each student for a whopping $78,000 per child. Did y'all hear that? Each child, each family could get $78,000 for their child. That is coming from our public school budgets. Wealthy districts are hurt less than poor, but all public schools will lose state money to the tune of about $210 million sucked out of our public schools budgets annually. And we're now already seeing the catastrophic results from taking more than $11 billion from our public schools in the last 30 years. I'm here to tell you $30 million is not fully funding public school in any way, shape, or form. And lastly, and no one has talked about this much yet, I think this is absolutely critical. Number 3, voucher programs are known to decrease student outcomes. They decrease student outcomes. That's the intention of this program, right? To improve our students' education. But the reality is that vouchers are not a new, brilliant idea. They've been tried in other states. And when they have, they're proven to actually decrease achievement. That's right, subsidizing private school does not improve student outcomes, and in the long-term studies that have been conducted, it's actually decreased the outcomes. Repeated studies of voucher programs across the country show that vouchers result in worse test programs in Milwaukee, Cleveland, the District of Columbia, and they found that students who received vouchers showed no improvement in reading or math over those not in the program. Other studies conducted by Fordham University, the U.S. Department of Education, the Brookings Institute, and others show long-term voucher programs cause a decline in academic achievement that rivals or even exceeds those caused by natural disasters, including the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know if y'all are hearing this, but after aggregating the test scores for voucher participants in Indiana, Louisiana, Ohio, Washington, one of these research described the results as some of the biggest drops we've ever seen in test scores in the research community. The worst scores. We are advocating for a change for innovation, but I don't think reduced outcomes is the change we're looking for. Rather than voting for this bill, we could do new things. Instead, unite and invest in fully funding pre-K and kindergarten. Research shows that actually does improve our outcomes. Providing for professional salaries to attract and retrain quality teachers. You want to get to a lower classroom ratio? Let's hire some more teachers. Funding literacy curriculum to improve our embarrassing 42nd ranking this year, and increase professional learning for educators and fund our high-quality curriculum. This bill does not diminish the rights of parents to send their kids to the schools of their choice. They can still do that. But it does, in fact, diminish our public schools. And I have to say, this afternoon, it has been quite rich to hear talk about the importance of choice. But our choice is to fund education for all kids, not just some. And as the great-granddaughter of 2 public school teachers, the granddaughter of a Cobb County public school teacher for more than 20 years, and the daughter of a high school chemistry teacher, I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 233. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. Representative Becky Evans is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today in opposition to Senate Bill 233. This bill would send public funds to our private schools with little accountability for the performance of private schools, limited transparency, and no estimate of the program costs. I want to talk about money and values. We're saying it is about money, and I think it's because our state and our budget, it's our priorities. Our budget reflects our priorities as a state. And it is true that education is the largest proportion of our budget. I recognize that, and I'm very grateful for that. But I want to talk about what we're choosing to fund and what we're not choosing to fund with this bill. Yes, it is true that we have fully funded QBE for the past 4 years, and I'm grateful for that. But as we've heard earlier, QBE hasn't been updated in over 30 years. And we know that there are so many things that are a part of educating our children that QBE does not support. At the beginning of this session in the Education Committee, I remember we had excellent speakers talking to us about what we need to do to improve education. We heard from the Georgia Partnership and Excellence in Education. One of the things they talked about was the need for more counselors. And in this budget, we appear to be poised to fund counselors for special education and gifted students. So that's good. That's one challenge. I want to see if that actually makes it in the budget. But others remain. Counselors are funded at a ratio of 1 counselor to 450 students, above the 1 to 250 students recommended by the American Counselor Association. We need these counselors so that our students can have guidance on their college and career pathways. This body has recognized our 48th or 49th ranking of those providing mental health services to Georgians. the Mental Health Parity Act, and this year's expansion of behavioral health reforms. I'm hoping that will pass, and I'm grateful for that. But in our schools, our state funds school social workers and school psychologists, one for every 2,475 students. And that is above the recommended ratio of 1 to 250 students for social workers and 1 to 500 for school psychologists. Another thing is Georgia is one of the 6 states that doesn't provide extra funding for low-income students through the K through 12 funding formula. We learned that we need to provide a poverty weight. This was recommended to us, and several of our legislators have recommended that, and that's something we're choosing not to fund. Transportation costs. We learned that the portion of student transportation costs covered by the state has shrunk from 50% in the 90s to less than 15% annually. This expense, which often falls harder on rural districts, limits the district's investments of local funds into the classroom. So I want to just take a look for us up at the map. We could talk about all these other ways we're not funding schools. But I want to take a look here at this map you see on the board, and this is a map of where we have private schools in Georgia. And if you take a look at the map, the white part is where there are no private schools in Georgia. The yellow is where there's one private school. So we need to talk about who will this bill benefit. Will it benefit the students in rural Georgia who and I think you look at that map and you say, how will this bill benefit the students of rural Georgia when I look at that map? The other question about QBE is, yes, the bill states QBE needs to be funded in order for this to be implemented. But what about if we go into recession? What will happen with that? Will QBE be funded, or will our private schools be funded? What will our choice be? So we've talked about the $6,500 that we're spending per student, what this program will cost, and you've heard estimates of cost from other people speaking to this bill. But I do want to have us think about what we've done with our voucher programs before. We currently the education scholarship. The tax credit scholarship, that started at $58 million. We've bumped that up to $120 million. The scholarship for students with we're at $30 million for the students with disabilities scholarship. What will this increase to? That is what we don't know. All right, students, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I ask that you please do not vote for this bill. Let's fully fund all these other things instead of funding private schools for our children where we have no accountability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. That completes the minority report. Now we'll have the chair's time. Chair has up to 20 minutes for chairman's time. We will now recognize the chairman from which this bill came, Chairman Irwin, for the chairman's time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I'd like to do is share this chairman time with the pro tem, if that is okay, Mr. Speaker.
That's your call.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
The Speaker Pro Tem of this House is recognized to speak to the bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your efforts on this legislation. I'm just going to make a couple sort of off-the-cuff remarks. I will say that in 20 years I've served on the Education Committee. I've never worked on a voucher bill. I've only worked...
The lady will suspend. Members, please give the member in the wheel your attention. I know it's been a lengthy debate, but this is important. Give the lady in the wheel your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have only worked on legislation that was aimed at students in public schools, teachers in public schools, including public charter schools, and this is the first time. And some might ask, well, why did you decide to get involved? And it's because it's become clear as over these 20 years that our state and our constituents, and in particular after COVID, a couple years of disruption, there are some of them that would like another option. And it's not a rejection of public school. Usually it's, family of three, and maybe it's just not quite working for one. Maybe one doesn't quite fit in. We have public schools with 3,000 students in them. That's just not for everyone. And I'm not sure we should play King Solomon and be the ones to decide what, where you're going to go. And but I don't see it as either you're supporting public schools or you're supporting other options. Because it's not just private schools, it's these micro schools that have emerged, and homeschoolers who don't really fit the model, or what we thought of 20 years ago as sort of your traditional homeschoolers. Sometimes it's sort of your average mom, sometimes it's the dad who finds that one of their two kids, it's just not quite working, and their children come first to them, and who better to know that than the parent? And so after 20 years of, I've worked particularly on, y'all know, public charter schools, but I initiated the dual enrollment with the Move On When Ready, because, that's really just another option that, by the way, also uses private colleges to provide needed services to students, because sometimes the high school just doesn't one size fit all. And I haven't really found that dual enrollment to be particularly controversial. I worked on Hope Scholarship to allow students who take STEM classes, the very challenging STEM classes, to fulfill needed careers, that they would receive extra weight while they're in college, sort of akin to dual enrollment and AP weight. Oh, and by the way, at private colleges and public colleges where students are on Hope. So I think it's mischaracterize it to say that you have to be for one or the other, because serving on the Education Committee under some awesome education chairs, including Brooks Coleman, former Assistant Superintendent of Gwinnett County, or former Superintendent of the Year, Chris Irwin, Rick Jaspers, and now Matt Dubnik, who chairs the Education Appropriations. What all of us have seen is, times evolve, and education doesn't have to always look exactly the same. But I'll tell you what's consistent on the Education Committee. 95, 98% of the time, all we really work on is what you think of as more traditional public schools or charter schools. So again, it's not either or. And Georgia and our nation, if you think about it, has a long and strong record of using tax dollars for public purposes or goals, utilizing private or nonprofit institutions to provide needed services to individuals. It's not a rejection of, say, someone who works for the government. It just means that sometimes it takes an array of methods to fulfill state goals. In this case, education. Pell Grants go to public and private colleges. Well, they go to the student for public or private colleges. The GI Bill, public or private colleges. Head Start, private daycares, food stamps. People use them at private grocery stores, WIC, Medicare, Section 8 vouchers. We found give folks a public voucher, and instead of always having public housing, give them a voucher and let them decide where it's best to go, what best serves their needs. Medicaid, we don't hire all the doctors and PAs and nurse practitioners to provide services. We give people essentially a voucher through Medicaid and let them find the private provider that can best provide their needs. If you look through the budget, community affairs and community health, you'll find it's full of private, for-profit, and nonprofit providers that provide services that government alone never could provide all. And it's not a rejection. It's not to say that having government employees providing these services is any less. My children went to public school. They didn't want to go to a charter school. They wouldn't have wanted to go to a private school. But most of us know a few kids where maybe it just wasn't the best fit for them. And so I will say that, additionally, I'll say pre-K students. Out of 84,000 students in Georgia, 4 years old, receiving a pre-K voucher, half of them take that voucher to a private pre-K provider, generally a daycare center, and the other half go to a public school. I've never heard a single one of my colleagues on the floor or a constituent complain to me because they weren't all at the public school. And by the way, the private pre-K providers don't offer door-to-door bus service just as the public do. It's just a different option that works for some people. Well, apparently it works for half the pre-K parents. Our general budget funds 24,367 Georgia college students for $900 yearly TEG grants, tuition equalization grants, to take to a private college. That's out of the general budget, just as this would be. And by the way, there's no fiscal note on that because it's appropriated. A fiscal note, just sort of a little learning lesson here, a fiscal note is required for a tax bill because a tax bill is an appropriation in law. It recurs until you change the law. You know, we fight over those just about every year a little bit on the floor. An appropriation, I look at the difference. An appropriation is an addition or subtraction. Ways and means is multiplication and division. It multiplies every year. Every year you pay it if it's a tax bill, if it's a tax law. In appropriation, it goes down, it goes up. There's no fiscal note here because it's zero until the Appropriations Committee in the House, the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, and the governor signs the bill for some amount. Maybe they decide it's going to be 50 children. Maybe it's going to be 100 of these. We don't know. That would go through an appropriations process. Georgia's budget funds between $4,600 and $6,000 a year for Hope Private and Hope Zell Private yearly scholarships to students that attend our 30 private colleges. If you don't like using public dollars, and those are public dollars that are they're appropriated, then Matt Hatchett is over there waiting. You know, we're going to have the conference committee let us know if you want to cut that money out, because that is a voucher going to our 30 private schools. And I'll just remind you, there are constituents too. That's why I don't begrudge using TEG or Private Hope, because who am I to tell someone that they shouldn't go to, you know, Young Harris or Mercer or these other colleges that also, by the way, hire our constituents to provide these services to our constituents. And I value them. I'm a product of public colleges in Georgia. My children are products of public colleges in Georgia, but they have friends and I have constituents, and so do you, that have utilized these services. One of the members mentioned the Special Needs Scholarship for those with disabilities and the SSO, both of which use public dollars. I will mention that neither of those programs has the accountability, transparency, and testing provisions that Senate Bill 233 possesses. I would ask anyone to demonstrate or to show another voucher plan in any state that is as well crafted, narrowly crafted, and with as much transparency and accountability as this bill. And I do thank those on the Education Committee that worked so hard, as well as the Senate who initiated it. And all of these examples that I'm sharing with you, and I will close, they don't necessarily, it's not that they don't support public education, public colleges, or public health, or all the other vouchers that we have in our budget. What they do is they expand and they enhance the reach of state government to cover the needs and the aspirations of all Georgians. And I would ask for you to consider voting for Senate Bill 233. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I will yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. Do you have any remainder of the time is yielded to the governor's floor leader, Representative Will Wade.
Hey guys, good evening. So first, a lot of y'all were in the anteroom and y'all were talking, and I think y'all need to hear something really important. Today is my 20th wedding anniversary, people, so thank you. Love you, Jennifer. Thank you for all you do, and I know you're taking care of our beautiful children. So I want to address a couple things because some of you have heard some information that I'm not going to speak negatively of one of our peers, but I'm not sure that they were made aware of some of the actual things that we've done in this House through our Education Committee with folks that have deep background in education, from a superintendent, from a former CAT director, former teachers, etc. We have put in this in section 20-2B-4 a few items. This is not going to go into effect again until not this next school year, but the following. There's going to be a year of planning to ensure that these things are met. But we are going to require things like aggregate data of student attendance and course completion rates of the eligible core courses and the CTA courses that these students will be receiving in this school. This is an accountability and transparency piece that I've heard educational advocates for over a decade asking for. We'll also continue to ensure that they will attend a public school first. This is not going to allow somebody that's currently in private school an opportunity to come back and circumvent the system. This is to ensure that kids that are in these schools that are in the bottom quartile of performance will have this option. In lines 162, we're going to comply with anti-discrimination provisions. They're going to comply with all health and safety laws and codes that apply to private schools. They have to be located in Georgia. Folks, somebody got up here and told you a few things that weren't true. I just want it to be factual. I know this body respects facts. I'm a believer in facts. I also want you to think about this. They are going to ensure every single year that the funds that are utilized, there's going to be a report that's going to be given and submitted to this body. We're going to talk about effectiveness and comparisons for outcomes. We're not going to do this without considering that this is an actual better option for students. We're going to have tests I think some of you weren't in the room, so I want you to hear this. Chairman Jones indicated to you that there's going to be a norm reference test every single year. We do not currently require that of our public schools. If a student receives this, they will be required to do so. And in the 3rd grade and the 8th grade, they will be taking the same test that public school 3rd graders and 8th graders take, so that we can compare that data. I've heard advocates for years ask us to do that. We are doing that in this legislation. So I just wanted you to be aware that that is extremely important to this House. It was extremely important to the Education Committee because we believe that is a proper way to address those comparative concerns. I understand that there are folks that are receiving a few messages, and I get it. There's a lot of folks that don't know exactly what's in this bill. But we all have a responsibility to be a part of analyzing what this is going to do for constituents. And again, I just want to remind you, children should be the center of our focus, not adults. I love our teachers. Y'all, they have been through some of the toughest times over the last couple of years. And this state has supported them with pay raises, fully funding education. Now, if we want to have a conversation about updating QBE, I'm there, I'm ready. I'm very willing to address that. This is not the time. We're in a period of time in which we have fully funded it, and let's continue that conversation. Let's gather more information based on student outcomes across this state. But I ask you this. If you're a person that still hasn't decided, think about this. To me, this is going to be the most important point, so I hope you will listen. There are school systems and communities that are doing a lot for kids. They get up every day and they try. The teachers try. The families try. The community tries. And they succeed. But there are also parts of this state that have had struggles. I came from a community that had those struggles as a kid. Half my freshman class was a class of 202 of us in 1993. I graduated with 96 in 96. That wasn't acceptable. Folks, there are too many communities that we have kids that are, yes, they're at 100% poverty rate, but they're also at 100% not reading at grade level in 3rd grade. They're at 100% not reading at grade level in 8th grade. Those parents are looking for an option. No one is going to require them to take this. If they are completely satisfied with the school that they are in, and they want to continue to hope that things are going to get better and that next teacher the next year is going to work out, or if they repeat 1st grade that it's going to get better the next time, I respect that those families have that choice. But if you're that parent that has been in that classroom and seen the situation not get any better, we had a testimony from one of the colleagues in the Democratic Party come and talk to us about kids on buses fighting in schools because the school buses were overcrowded. We looked at the school system's data. This school system had over $100 million in their ending fund balance, and they can't, as adults, figure out how to make the decisions to ensure that those buses are not adequately running so that the kids can not have to sit in each other's laps. Look, these are adult issues and we need to address it, but kids need us to make this an option. Again, I believe every person in here needs to know that Governor Kemp appreciates the effort of both the Senate and this House, but he really appreciates and he supports this legislation because this strikes the balance that this discussion needs. It gives parents choices, and I hope that you will consider supporting this, I believe, meaningful option that is not going to decimate public education. It's going to give choice to those that have been asking for it, and I hope that you will give your vote. With that, I yield the well. Thank you.
Good timing, because your time had expired. For what purpose does Speaker Pro Tem Jones rise?
Make a motion.
State your motion.
I move that this House table Senate Bill 233.
Clerk will read the caption.
Senate Bill 233 by Senator Donizell of the 27th, being entitled an act to amend Title 20 of the official code of Georgia annotated relating to education so as to provide for the establishment of promised scholarship accounts to be funded by the state in the amount of $6,000 per school year.
On the lady's motion that SB 233 be tabled, is there objection? There is objection. Does the lady move? The lady moves. All those in favor of the motion to table will vote yes. Those opposed to the motion will vote no. And the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machines. On the lady's motion to table, the yeas are 95 and the nays are 70. SB 233 is on the table. All right. Members, we have a couple of bills we did not get to, so they will be postponed to the next legislative day. SB 20, SB 64, and SB 155 will be postponed until the next legislative day. Members, we do have some more business. We have another committee meeting that will be taking place in just a few moments. Well, we could probably make that announcement now. Representative Chairman Smith is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Speaker. Rules Committee will meet in 5 minutes.
The House will stand at ease. The House will stand at ease.